Greetings, Saxons. I'm Ms. Masters, and this is First Chapter Friday. September 15th through October 15th is Hispanic Heritage Month, in which the United States celebrates the contributions and influence of Hispanic and Latin Americans to the history, culture, and achievements of the country. In honor of Hispanic Heritage Month, today I'll be reading the first chapter of the novel Disappeared by Mexican-American author Francisco X. Stork. Let me start by reading the inside flap of the book to you so that you know what you're getting into. 4 months ago, Sara Zapata's best friend disappeared, abducted by the criminals who rule over Juarez. 4 weeks ago, her brother, Emiliano, fell in love with Perla Ruby, a girl whose family is as rich as her name. 4 hours ago, Sara received a death threat, and her first clue to her friend's location. 4 minutes ago, Emiliano was offered a way into Perla Ruby's world if he betrays his own. In the next 4 days, Sara and Emiliano will each face impossible choices between life and justice, friends and family, truth and love. But when the criminals come after Sara, only one path remains for both the siblings: the way across the desert to the United States. Disappeared by Francisco X. Stork. The introduction to the book appears to be perhaps a newspaper article. El Sol, Ciudad Juarez, Mexico, January 7th, 1 hour late, by Sara Zapata. On the morning of November 14th, the day she was kidnapped, Linda Fuentes opened the door to my house and walked into the kitchen, where my family was having breakfast. As usual, I wasn't ready. Linda and I had an ongoing argument. She said I was always late, and I said she got to my house early, to bask in the adoration of my younger brother, Emiliano. But we had been best friends for 14 years, so we could forgive each other anything. I heard her laughing and chatting with my mother and Emiliano until I was ready to go. Our routine had been the same every morning for the past 2 years. We walked the 6 blocks from my house to Boulevard Pablo II, where we caught a bus that would take us to the cathedral. From there, I would catch another bus to the offices of the newspaper, and Linda walked 3 blocks to her job at a shoe store on Francisco Villa Avenue. Linda had dropped out of school and taken the job at the shoe store when her father was paralyzed in a construction accident. Her salary, along with a small income that her mother made from sewing, supported her parents and 2 younger sisters. Linda always waited with me until my bus arrived. We stayed together as much as possible, partly because most abductions of women in Juarez occur downtown, and partly as protection against the comments of men driving or walking by. Every time a man said something offensive, Linda and I would whisper "Puchi" to each other and laugh. I found an empty bus seat that morning, a small miracle, and when I looked out the window, I saw Linda jump up and down in excitement over my good luck. As the bus pulled away, she stuck her tongue out at me. That was the last time I saw my best friend. I worked all day at this newspaper. At 7 p.m., I got a phone call from Linda's mother. I knew as soon as I heard Mrs. Fuentes' shaky voice that something terrible had happened. Linda got off work at 4, and she had never been home later than 6. If you are a daughter or a sister or a wife in Juarez, the one thing you always do if you're going to be late is call. And if your friend is 1 hour late and she hasn't called home, your heart begins to break. Mrs. Fuentes was hoping against hope that Linda and I had decided to go to the movies after I finished work. She knew we would never do that without calling our families first, but when you're worried, you grasp at straws. Mrs. Fuentes had already called the shoe store where Linda worked, and the owner told her that Linda left a few minutes after 4 that afternoon. She walked toward the bus station with plenty of time to catch the 4:30 bus that would get her home by 6 at the latest. Linda usually left with another employee from the store, but that day she traveled those 3 blocks alone. What do you do? Where do you go when your best friend has disappeared and you know deep inside that the worst has happened? You pray for a miracle, but you act like a detective. I called the bus company and was assured that there were no accidents or other unusual occurrences on Linda's route. When I got home, I asked a neighbor with a car to drive me downtown on the same streets the bus takes. We parked the car near the cathedral and walked the blocks that Linda walked every day to her job. We showed Linda's picture to store owners, to bus drivers, to street vendors. We drove to municipal police headquarters and were told that they had no jurisdiction to investigate missing girls. Later that night, I took Mrs. Fuentes to the state police, and we were told to go home and wait. "Your daughter's probably having a drink with a boy," the officer in charge said, a smirk on his face. We drove to the general hospital. She wasn't there. A kind nurse checked with the other hospitals. Nothing. That night, everyone who knew Linda gathered at her house. Everyone offered Linda's parents and her sisters hope. We tried to be positive, but we couldn't shake off what we knew. In 90% of Juarez's missing girl cases, their bodies are found a month or two later. We agreed to make flyers with Linda's picture and personal details and decided where to post them. We made a list of all the government authorities, all the groups of mothers missing daughters who we would contact. We went on Facebook and Twitter and asked for help. Mrs. Fuentes finally cried herself to sleep around 6 that morning. It has been almost 2 months since Linda disappeared. Every week, I accompany Mrs. Fuentes to the state police headquarters and we inquire about Linda. We know what the answer to our questions will be, but we want to keep putting pressure on the police. We want them to know that someone cares. Mr. and Mrs. Fuentes have been called twice to the forensic offices to identify pieces of clothing found on the bodies of young women. I have seen their relief when the clothing is not Linda's, and then, immediately, the return of the restless, gnawing grief that comes from not knowing what happened to your daughter. I wake up each morning thinking that I hear Linda's laughter in the kitchen. When I step into the bus that took us downtown every morning, I look for 2 seats. Sometimes I think I see her waiting for me with the ice cream cones we treated ourselves with at the end of the day. But those brief moments of hope quickly disappear, and I feel even more alone, with a sense of her absence so real I can almost touch it. Maybe in other cities in the world, a young woman can be 1 hour late and it isn't a cause for worry. In Juarez, that is simply not possible. It is true that the number of desaparecidas has greatly diminished over the years, so the number of killings and disappearances is now, as our public officials like to tell us, comparable to other cities of similar size. By comparable, they mean, for example, that the number of disappearances last year was only 64. And by November, when Linda disappeared, there had been only 46 reported cases of missing girls. But optimism at the normal number of disappearances will never comfort a best friend's grief. The emptiness I feel can't be filled with comparisons to other cities or with statistics. Linda, the friend who entered my house every morning without knocking, is missing. And the only way to lessen the pain is to look for her. To keep looking for her as long as we promised our friendship would last. I will keep looking for you, my dear friend, forever and ever. If you've enjoyed the first chapter of Disappeared by Francisco X. Stork, then drop by the library and you can check out a copy and finish it up. Have a great weekend, Saxons.